Okay. Okay. My project is called Venezuelan Migration to Montgomery County, Maryland. It's about Venezuelan immigrants that are moving into Montgomery County, Maryland. Okay. So the first section is called Global Sensitivity, What I Know About My Community. So this will talk about Venezuelan immigrants as a whole. Not necessarily why they left Venezuela yet, but just how they got to Montgomery County, Maryland. And then I'll talk about Montgomery County itself and why it might be attractive for immigrants, why they might end up there, and what might not be so great for immigrants. So I just wanted to start off by laying some context and talking about, let me move my face. um, I wanted to lay some context, talk about how I found it. How did these immigrants arrived in Montgomery County, Maryland? So I just took some current events that I initially found when I was trying to decide what I wanted to research. The article I initially found was the one at the bottom here. As no plane arrives in Delaware, migrants continue to come to Maryland by bus. And then I just used the other two just to provide a little bit of context, just to explain what's going on in this article. What I wanted to do was click the links and like highlight what I thought were the key points in the articles, but it like shoves so many ads in my face, I think it would blow up my computer. So what I did was I just let me move my face again. I just took what I highlighted and put it on the slides. So the first article was as no plane arrives in Delaware, migrants continue to come by Maryland by bus. It talks about Venezuelan immigrants who are coming to Maryland or all across the USA from southern states. They initially arrived in Florida and Texas, but Republican governors such as Ron DeSantis are sending those immigrants upwards in the country to try and send a political message. They're essentially using them as political pawns, but which is very wrong. But I'm not going to get into that in this presentation. I just want to talk about the specific group. But this article talks about Montgomery County, Maryland specifically. It talks about local organizations providing assistance to immigrants that are arriving through Union Station in Montgomery County. Um, this quote here is from Sister Charlotte Wagner, who is a Catholic nun who's been at Union Station this year. And she said the majority of immigrants are arriving from Venezuela, but there are also immigrants from Cuba, Colombia, and Brazil as well. She said 85% of those who arrive at Union Station move on, and they're not really going to end up in Montgomery County. But she said about 15% decide to stay there, and that's the group that I'm going to focus on. She said as to why they're coming from Maryland for the most part, it's just because that's where the bus is taking them and they don't really have a choice. And that's something that I definitely want to take note of and what you should be taken away from this presentation when you consider what they're going to be living in Montgomery County. She said that the individuals are placed in hotel space for about a month in the county if they have nowhere else to go. And at the hotel, Catholic Charities and other organizations provide case management services, and they try to help with housing and enrolling the children in school. A good quote from her that I thought would be really relevant. She said that I hope that the decision makers would keep in mind that these are vulnerable human beings and treat them in the way that they would want to be treated, or that they would want their loved ones to be treated if they found themselves in a similar situation. And I think that just holds really true to the situation as a whole. There we go. Another article I used was a Washington Post article. It was called Aid for Arriving Migrants Strained Amid Dispute Over Who Should Help Them. This really just provided a little more context to what was going on in Montgomery County. Let me move my face again. So it talks again about the respite center that is in Montgomery County and how it keeps on filling up because there's just so many immigrants coming through, and they don't have enough resources to support them. And again, they're being used as political pawns and just being moved up into states that don't really have the infrastructure or expecting to have them. And I think right here, when it's described as a growing humanitarian crisis, I think that's honestly really true, and you have to think of it that way because it's the aid for them is really thin, and it's getting really tough for these migrants who are just trying to seek out a better life. And here they are in Montgomery County. When they come out of Union Station, I highlighted it over here. It says that the neighborhood surrounding the station is one of the city's priciest real estate markets, and it's home to the federal government buildings already in use. And so there's not really that many good housing options that they can afford. And the available buildings that they do have don't have amenities such as bathrooms or a kitchen. And they don't really have the conditions that should be met for a living person. So what I also highlighted was several of them have been housed in hotels, and some of them just live in the street in blankets and chairs, um, which I think is pretty sad. The third article I chose kind of emphasizes this. This isn't directly related to Montgomery County, but I just wanted to include this just to show that like these immigrants are getting on buses and they're being sent across the company because of the country because of these political agendas. And you can see over here, this man Luis Oswaldo missed his charter bus, and he's just describing himself as eating water because he has nothing else. He has nowhere to go. Same with Luis's. Same over here on the picture on the right. It talks about that flight from Delaware that is directly adjacent to the Montgomery County bus. In the first article I was looking at, um, all of them talk about the flight from Delaware, and they were arranged by government officials and were just canceled because they weren't actually going to happen. And so now these migrants are traveling by bus across the country, and they get off wherever, um, and they have nowhere to go. They have nothing to do. They have no money. So when migrants arrive at Union Station and into Montgomery County, Maryland, they're just lost, and people need to be considerate of that because, I mean, they don't necessarily choose to be there, but if you're there, they're just stuck there. So talking about Montgomery County as a whole, you can see that most Venezuelan immigrants are concentrated from coming from Venezuela, from Texas and Florida, coming into those states, but then they're being moved upwards recently. And so the little area we're going to be focusing on is right here. That's the Maryland, West Virginia, DC area. Um, and this is where a lot of migrants are starting to be moved up to and integrated into these communities. So some quick facts about Montgomery County, Maryland. It's the largest county in Maryland with a population of over 1.055 million, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And it borders the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., which provides a variety of easy transportation, such as metro and buses, and job opportunities for potential newcomers. So it is a bit of an attractive place for immigrants, as well as the fact that it tends to be very democratic, which is usually favorable for immigrant populations. Um, but as in addition, it's not changing slides. Oh, there we go. Um, uh, it's a very good area for education. It had 210 schools in 2023, which was the largest school district in the state of Maryland, and it had a 91.4 graduation rate in 21. So those are 2021, which are very good numbers. It's majorly represented by elementary grades K through 5 with 72,338 students. And as we'll see later when we look at some specific demographics for Venezuelans immigrating into the U.S., that's a good spot where a lot of Venezuelan children will be. And in terms of demographics, these schools are actually populated largely by Hispanic and Latino Americans, white Americans, and African Americans. Just changing slides. Or not. Oh, there we go. So this is some mid-year EOL evidence of learning data, and that measures student performance, including grades, data from curriculum-aligned assessments, and state and national assessments. And as you can see in Montgomery County, Maryland school districts, the students are progressing, they're getting smarter, and so the education that they're receiving is actually very good. I got this from the Montgomery County website itself. They said that education is a top priority in Montgomery County, with over half the county budget going to public education. And the county also supports higher education opportunities in the county, as well as vocational and professional training programs. So, in terms of education as a whole, it's a very good county to be in. It's a very attractive place for immigrants to move into. But the problem is economy. I just keep my face here, actually. Montgomery County is in the 99th percentile of all counties in the United States in terms of household income, household net worth, and educational attainment. And its economic output exceeds more than 13 states. So those are great achievements for a county itself, but it's going to be a bit out of price range for a lot of Venezuelan immigrants, especially those who are literally stranded at a Union Station, getting off a bus and having nowhere else to go. They're going to have a very hard time finding housing. They're going to have a very hard time getting settled down and trying to build wealth. In addition, Montgomery County only holds 5% increase in job growth and a 14% increase of household income from 2004 to 2009, which are rates that are comparatively a lot lower than other regions in Maryland. And because of that, the county is going to have a limited tax base, and therefore it's not going to have the ability for high quality infrastructure services, and most importantly, the ability for residents to buy homes if you're new to the county. And that's going to make it very difficult for immigrants who are moving into Montgomery County to build wealth or settle down or try to generate any sort of income or livelihood whatsoever. So with that being said, what is our responsibility to encounter, welcome, and understand these immigrants, especially in regards to economic trends in Montgomery County? Most of the residents in the county already hold high degrees of education and high household incomes. And so this is going to make it very difficult for Venezuelan immigrants that are moving in because they don't have any of that necessarily. They're just stranded and lost. And so back to the articles that I was reading earlier, a lot of them just end up staying in hotels or on the street initially because they have nowhere else to go. They can't afford anything else. Um, I think this is a really unique situation. When I was thinking about Mozilla and Gardner's core dilemma in terms of globalization, where they were talking about like Coca-Colaization and American factories moving into Chinese infrastructures and destroying or potentially destroying their national capital, throwing off their entire economy. Um, I think that that's interesting to look at when you think of it the opposite way, like happening in the U.S. in this situation, where new entrants are coming into an already, I guess, relatively stable economy, and it's already a well-to-do economy, and in a lot of those people's perspectives, bringing in new Venezuelan immigrants is putting that economy at risk. It's putting social cohesion and sustainable development at risk. And that can lead to a lot of rejection and poverty for these groups because they have nowhere to go and they're being rejected. Instead of giving them the opportunity for economic integration, I think it's really important to give these groups a shot rather than just casting them out. And that's changing slides. And just using hospitality and compassion, defined by Conway as the simple, gracious welcoming of the other, the stranger and foreigner, into one's civil community. So I chose that quote just to emphasize that. I think it's important that welcoming our neighbors, no matter where they're from, what they need. These individuals are basically stuck in Montgomery County in some cases, or they're going somewhere else by bus, and they just need help, and they shouldn't be treated as an inconvenience or like something that's going to destroy the social way of life or economy. But you need to look at it with a perspective of they provide opportunity to the economy. They can grow the economy as a whole. They can grow the diversity. They just need a chance to settle down and start building wealth. And if they don't have that chance, they're going to struggle, obviously. Um, so with that being said, this section will talk about global understanding and what I learned about Venezuelans and what they're coming from in Venezuela. So instead of focusing on how they're getting to Montgomery County, this section is going to talk about why they're coming to America as a whole from Venezuela. Switch slides. So since 2010, as you can see here, let me move my face. The United States has seen nearly triple the amount of Venezuelan immigrants entering the country. It's a dramatic increase in Venezuelan immigrants recently leaving their country. And so you have to ask why, what's happening in Venezuela, what's causing them to leave and seek a better life. So there's a lot of political and economic turmoil in Venezuela. Since coming to power in 2013, their new president, Nicolás Maduro, has utilized security forces, corrupt forts, and allowed bribery, drug trafficking, and illegal gold mining to maintain complete control over the country and its population. There's just a lot of political corruption, human rights violations. According to Foro Penal, which is a Venezuelan human rights group, as of March 2023, the government has imprisoned 282 political prisoners. And because of that as well, U.S., United Nations, and international sanctions as a whole started to pressure the country alongside mismanaging the economy, corruption, and decline in oil production. Venezuela's economy started to tank. And according to the International Money Fund, it actually contracted by 80% between 2014 and 2021, which is not good numbers at all. That's not what you want to see in a country. And it's really going to hurt the people that are living there. The National Survey of Living Conditions, which was conducted by a Venezuelan university in Venezuela, estimated that roughly 50% of the population lived in poverty in 2022. But that was actually a step down from 65% in 2021. It's still over half the population, down to half the population in poverty. Um, and that's just not good numbers to see. You're going to see that a lot of people are going to start to struggle. A lot of people are going to struggle to get basic needs, and they're going to need to leave the country because they need to seek out a better life. So the effects, according to the UN Refugee Agency, over 7.13 million Venezuelan refugees worldwide have migrated from their country to escape the violence, insecurity, lack of food and water in their country. And this is the second largest external displacement crisis in the world. I don't think the USA is the number one country taking in Venezuelans. I believe it's number 3, but it's still a major player in where Venezuelan immigrants are ending up. Um, and so we have to be considerate of that these people are living in very harsh conditions and they're just trying to find a better life. This article here I selected, I was looking at current events again. This is about an individual in Venezuela who basically takes tap water or groundwater, whatever water he can find, and he collects it and he sells it to people in his neighborhood. And he's basically revered as a hero um, because they don't have water anymore. The government stopped bringing them water. They don't have running water. You can see this quote here. This individual remembers when water flowed through a sink faucet and all the promises politicians have made to restore service, and she just laughs at that prospect. They don't have that anymore. They don't have any of the basic amenities we could never imagine being without in our country. They don't have any of that in Venezuela. And I highlighted this part over here this just tells again what's going on: decreasing value of wages and runaway inflation in an economic and political crisis. That's what it is. And those who buy water through formal or informal vendors, they can't pay for it. They don't have running water. The government's not bringing it anymore. And now it's to a point where they can't even afford to buy it off vendors because they're just ripping them off. So this is kind of an isolated situation. It's happening with a lot of amenities, not just water, but I just thought that was. I mean, water is like the most basic human resource that we have, and they don't even have this. Um, and then I just chose this image here because I just thought it was really sad, and it's just a Venezuelan child, and it's just really sad to see. But it's important to understand what these people are coming from, and understand what they're going through, so that we can not only equip ourselves to help them, but to equip them to succeed in our society. Um, so in regards to that, when you look at age and employment among Venezuelan immigrants moving into America, based off the data on the right, Venezuelan immigrants are actually typically younger than overall foreign-born population, but older than U.S. natives, usually around 41 years old, in comparison to 41 or 37 for international or U.S.-born immigrants. And this is actually right in the working age between 18 and 64, which is really helpful for Venezuelan immigrants because they can just hop right into the workforce. And you also should note from that that's the age where you're going to have young or like pre-education children, especially in Montgomery County. That's like the bread and butter of their educational system. So it makes it an attractive place for Venezuelans to live there if they can afford it. But that's the biggest problem. But it's still a very good educational spot, and it's a great place for them to live. There we go. So, and Venezuelan adults as well, approximately 57% of Venezuelan immigrants ages 25 and older reported having a bachelor's degree or higher. And Venezuelan immigrants with a college degree between 2017 and 2021 round out to about 62%. So a lot of Venezuelan immigrants have degrees and are educated in Venezuela. And you can see here, it's very common. They usually end up in sales and office occupations. They're in the U.S. They're willing and able to enter the workforce, but they're just going to have to overcome barriers such as language barriers, economic barriers. But you just have to give them a shot because they're able to work. A lot of them are actually well educated, but a lot of people just have this stigma of like, oh, well, they're immigrants. We don't know what to do with them. Blah blah blah. but these are actually Venezuelan immigrants are actually very well educated people. But with that being said, they do have barriers that you have to overcome. I'm going to move my face down here. Um, about 52% of Venezuelans ages 5 and over reported limited English proficiency in 2021, and approximately 6% only spoke only English at home, compared to over 17% in other immigrants. So more so than other immigrants, Venezuelans tend to have to overcome a large language barrier, um, as opposed to other immigrants. It's going to be tough for Venezuelans that are coming into counties such as Montgomery County, because they're not going to be able to speak English that well, and that's just something you have to work with. But in addition to that, they were found to have average lower incomes compared to overall international populations, with a median annual income of around 64,000 versus 70,000 for other households. And that's going to especially hurt in Montgomery County, Maryland, because it's an area with very high average household income. And so Venezuelans immigrants are really going to struggle to get on their feet and to try and build wealth. And that's something you have to really be considerate about. They're also less likely to be naturalized in comparison to other international immigrants. This is largely because they're entering the U.S. so recently. Like you can see here, in 2010 or later is the largest spike in Venezuelan immigration, just because the issues that are happening in their country are so recent. But hopefully that statistic will change over time, and more Venezuelans will start to become naturalized. But until then, you have to be patient. They're not. It doesn't just happen overnight. Like a lot of these Venezuelan immigrants are new to the U.S. They're just kind of stuck. They're coming off of buses like those in Montgomery County, Maryland, and they're going to have some barriers that they're going to have to overcome, including language barriers. They might still be unauthorized immigrants, and you have to kind of ignore that stigma. It's like, oh, it's an illegal immigrant, because a lot of these people are just new to the U.S. and they just haven't been able to get documentation or anything. They're just trying to seek out a better life. But with that being said, they are expected to become more commonly green card holders, just because the naturalization process takes so long. And that trend will likely continue into the future. So just some key takeaways from that whole section, just to reemphasize like what we can draw from all those graphs and stories and what's happening in Venezuela. Like how can we use their experiences to better inform ourselves on how we can help them. So as I said before, they're more likely to have a college degree and are ready to enter the workforce if they are able, is the key word, because they're going to have to overcome language barriers, income barriers, all sorts of barriers to try and adjust to life in their new homes. And a large portion of those immigrants will likely not be naturalized citizens, but they may pursue green cards, or they may take other paths. And many of these immigrants are coming from harsh conditions and poverty and have been forced out of their homes out of necessity. And you have to be considerate of that. They're coming from very harsh conditions. All they want is a better life. They're not actively trying to ruin yours. They're just trying to help themselves, their families, their future children. So the final part here is global self-representation, how I am part of globalization. So this is just going to talk about what Montgomery County, Maryland can do and what I can do as a whole just to help these groups out. A quote here, we become, I'm going to put my face over here, we become aware of the inclinations, relationships, commitments, and concerns that link us to the planet. So globalization is more than just international affairs or the globe. Like we need to welcome all peoples as the same people. There's no outsiders. Many immigrants, such as those coming through Union Station from Venezuela, they don't have a choice in migrating to a new country. They might not even have a choice of where they're going in the country. A lot of them migrated into Florida or Texas, and they're being moved across the country by plane or bus and spit out and abandoned in random spots that they might not have been supposed to go to. And they might not want to be there just as much as locals don't want them there. But we need to consider, how can we help them feel welcome or at home? Because at the end of the day, they're not trying to ruin your society. They're just trying to survive. And click. There we go. So that led me to think, what is my role in all this, and how am I personally represented within globalization with my neighbors? So thinking about Montgomery County, Maryland, a lot of Venezuelan immigrants entering this area have been stranded by or stuck off major transportation lines. Like I just said, they have nowhere else to go. And it's important for the community as a whole to welcome these neighbors and work with them to overcome their language, financial, and cultural barriers. I think it's important that we not only create a feeling of welcomeness, because I guess that goes without saying, but we need to actually welcome them. Social, economic, political immigration or integration. We need them to learn about our way of life and how they can contribute to their new community. And we need to make sure they actually have the resources and the capacity to do so. We need to make sure that they can fend for themselves financially, socially, culturally, and get into education and housing. Um, and me specifically, I don't actually live in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's just nearby. I actually live like close to Philadelphia, but um, thinking of like Venezuelan immigrants as a whole, for example, like in the summer, I'm working an internship where I'm going to be a financial advisor. And let's say, hypothetically, like a Venezuelan immigrant comes in there and they're looking for help, like trying to build wealth, trying to build a family because they're stuck in this area and the cost of living is high and they have nowhere else to go. It would be my role to help them get on the right track and begin to build wealth for themselves and their families. And I also work at a bar. And at that bar, I met Angel last summer. He's a Venezuelan line cook. We together. I mean, he did not speak very good English, but we would still have to make like basic commands between each other. So like I would know when a pizza's ready, or I know like when a chicken meat anything's ready. And he was actually a really cool guy. I knew a little bit of Spanish, so we would sometimes be able to communicate, and we would laugh and joke about like random customers or anything. But it was nice to be able to bond with him and try and help him overcome that barrier while we were also working together in the workplace. Um, Even though we had like different jobs, I guess, but we were working like in coordination. And I think that that can be applied to a lot of different positions. Like, even though these people have barriers, you can still work with them and you can still form great relationships with people, because they're your neighbors at the end of the day. Um, and you could work with them and form some really nice friendships, and they can boost your economy as a whole. Um, so I guess I just want to call, like, how can I do the best that I can to welcome any neighbors that I may encounter and help them adjust or live a better life. It's really important, especially in Montgomery County, people that might not want to be there or have to be there. Like, how are you going to help them overcome all their obstacles to better their lives? So we'll see how it plays out in the future. Thank you for listening. That is great.